Our home, I'm Brindley Rada. We'd like to do a special shout out to Christy Lene for the music in our opening sequence.
Oh, Christy is such a great guitar player, so we are really grateful for that music and also for all the online concerts that musicians have been giving. We've been taking part in that. Maybe you have too.
Yeah.
So really appreciate that.
Yeah, we've definitely enjoyed some great music. And speaking of great music, let's begin our service by going to the home of Steve and Mirabai Bangs with an original Heart Dream song titled All That I Need.
Generosity.
Oh, wrong one.
In her poem, Heart.
Good morning and welcome. We are so happy to be spending time with you today. Please join us in singing All That I Need.
All that I need comes to me. All that I need comes to me. The light of love and grace shines upon my face. All that I need comes to me. I've been set free, I'm released. I'm released. I've been set free, I'm released. The burden of my past has gone away at last. I've been set free, I'm released. Sweet rain that washes me clean, washes me clean. Sweet rain that washes me clean. The mind creates all things, into my life it brings. Sweet rain that washes me clean. All that I need comes to me. Comes to me. All that I need comes to me. The light of love and grace shines upon my face. All that I need comes to me. The light of love and grace shines upon my face. All that I need comes to me, comes to me.
Thank you, Heart Dream, for sharing your music with us today. Unity is a positive path for spiritual living. Our vision for the world is, we envision a spiritually awakened world where all life thrives in conscious oneness. Our mission is who we've come here to be. Let's say this together. We are a loving, inclusive community, expanding and living our divinity in sacred service for all. Our core values are love, connection, service, and wisdom. If you're with us for the first time, welcome. You are invited to fill out a connection card. Connection cards are available for everyone on the Watch Live page. You may submit a prayer request and our prayer team will pray with you throughout the week. You may also share feedback or request information.
And as you probably well know by now, all of our classes and events are available online and also by phone. So we have several new and exciting things to highlight for you this week. On Wednesday, We have Applying Dr. Joe Dispenza's Tools with Tracy Appleton. And as you may know, Tracy's had a very popular class for us for a long time at Unity once a month. So this is now going online starting this Wednesday. And the topic will be how to create a bubble of health around yourself. That's something that's in all of our minds, so it sounds pretty timely. So every third Wednesday of the month, beginning this Wednesday. And then on Thursday, my longtime prayer partner and I, Reverend Darlene Strickland of Unity of the Blue Ridge in North Carolina, are teaming up to bring our congregations together and explore affirmative prayer and also how you can form a prayer partnership. I can't tell you how wonderful that has been for me, and I really want to share that passion and that assistance that I've had for so long with you, along with boosting our understanding and inspiration around affirmative prayer. So join us this Thursday, 4 to 5:30. It's open to everyone, and you can find that login information on our website.
Kaleo and Elise Ching invite you to join them for the new 3-week class, The Divine Radiance of Qigong. Qigong is a Taoist shamanic practice based in Chinese medicine. In this series, you will learn acupuncture points to enhance your immune system, Qigong techniques to release toxic energy and cultivate radiant healing energy, Qigong meditations to connect deeply with nature and the divine. It starts this coming Saturday, May 23rd at 9:30 a.m. And we are making steady progress on building the labyrinth. Many of you have requested information on how to buy and bless bricks, so thank you for asking. A self-service station is now set up at Unity on the patio where you may write a blessing on your brick or send the blessing that you would like written on the brick to office@unityofwalnutcreek.org, and a staff member will write it for you. Make your donation online through PayPal, the Give app, GYVE, or leave a check in the secure office mail slot. Please clearly memo any donations for the labyrinth. The brick blessing will close May 31st. We thank you for your gifts and participation in this very exciting project.
It is a very exciting project. We've actually had our hands on the labyrinth as well, and it's really coming along. So following our service today, as always, you can log on at 12:45 for the virtual patio conversation. So just pop in and say hello, maybe pray with a prayer chaplain if you've got something on your mind. And then please see our website where we're keeping a full listing of everything and all the information to log on for all our events and classes. And if you are not receiving our weekly e-news that Susan Angelos compiles for us every week, fill out a connection card on the Watch Live page and you can get signed up and stay informed that way as well.
And now it's time for our statement of faith. As we prepare for our time of meditation, let's ground in our statement of faith. Let's take a deep breath together, settling into our hearts, and one more deep breath. Please join me. There is only one presence and one power in the universe and in my life. The all-loving goodness of God.
And so as many of you know, Terry Curtin's one of our prayer chaplains, and she's going to share with us a reading, which is always special because it comes with sign language. And the topic is the reading is an adaptation of the daily word on the topic of generosity. So enjoy this, and followed by guided meditation, silence, and music.
Generosity. In her poem, Heart Garden, Catherine Mel wrote, "My heart is a garden where thought flowers grow. The thoughts that I think are the seeds that I sow. Her words invite me to consider my inner garden. The thoughts I hold and the seeds I plant. I choose to sow the seeds of generosity, thinking spiritually true and uplifting thoughts about myself and others. I look for ways to encourage people to genuinely acknowledge them and show my appreciation. Every smile, helping hand, thoughtful acts, or forgiveness I offer cultivates more generosity within me. I trust these kind seeds also provide a bright welcome in our day. Today, I sow the seeds of generosity with kindness, forgiveness, and acts of goodwill.
May the love we're sharing spread its wings and fly across the earth and bring new joy to every soul who is alive. May the blessings of your grace and peace shine on everyone, and may we all see the light within, the light within. May the heart we're sharing open wide and heal our souls with faith, and may we all realize the path is love. May the love we're sharing spread its wings and fly across the earth and bring new joy to every soul who is alive. May the heart we're sharing open wide and heal our souls with faith, and may we all realize the path is love.
May the love we're sharing spread its wings and fly across the earth and bring new joy to every soul who is alive. Here in this quiet time, the silence, we infill with a divine love that is ever present. It has no limit, no ending place, no exhausted supply. Divine love is ever present and continuously flows. And so in this even few moments of communion, we start to open ourselves up and tap that ever-present supply. With every breath, we fill with this love. This generosity knows no bounds. It heals anything that needs to be healed. Reveals anything that needs to be revealed, for God itself is love. God, Goddess, Mother, Father, Friend, the principle that guides the universe. Whatever that is to you, many would agree. Its quality is love. And so let us rest in this generous wellspring, this continuous supply, the infinite love that holds and heals, that comforts, encourages, and guides. Just simply be here now with it. So as we enter the silence, with every breath, we open to the generous spirit of love. And now, as we are fulfilled in love and aware that that channel is open now, we ourselves, the channel, allowing ourselves to be the channel from the source of love, we can give it so generously. Knowing now that we have tapped the infinite source of love, that keeps on coming. It cannot be stopped unless we choose to stop the flow. And so now, in the divine flow, may we share that love so generously. Let it spread its wings and fly across the earth, touching every human heart, every animal's heart, every plant's essence. Let love be reignited in every living thing across this beautiful planet. Let love heal whatever needs to be healed. Let love reveal whatever needs to be revealed in every heart and mind and soul. Let us share so generously, because the generous Spirit shares with us, and we are simply an open channel now. May the love we're sharing spread its wings and fly across the earth and bring new joy to every soul who is alive. And so it is.
May the love we're sharing spread its wings and fly across the earth and bring new joy to every soul who is alive. May the heart we're sharing open wide and heal our souls with faith. And may we all realize the path is love.
Have you ever heard of a Wendigo? Sherry Dyer introduced me to that term this week. Sherry also, by the way, put together our beautiful images for our meditation, so thanks to Sherry for that. She also introduced me to an article in Legion magazine that explains a little bit more about this term, Wendigo. Wendigo is a word that's used by the Ojibwa people, also known as the Chippewa in the US. And in particular, Basil Johnston, who's an Ojibwa member and really a scholar who's written 11 books on the First Nations, talks about this term a little bit more fully and explains what it is. He says that a Wendigo is a human whose selfishness has overpowered their self-control to the point that satisfaction is no longer possible. Wendigos are always hungry, no matter how much they eat. So you get the basic idea of the Wendigo. It's really the epitome of greed, isn't it? And Basil talks about how in the last 200 years in North America, the Wendigo has expanded beyond the individual, and it can be things like national corporations that devour the resources and even devour each other, much like the legendary Indian giant cannibals that were Wendigos. So the problem is that the Wendigo has become even something that's not only acceptable, but maybe even admirable in our society. This idea of amassing great amounts of wealth beyond what we could ever possibly use is really upheld as something we want to aspire to. So we want to look today at this Wendigo essence, this way of behaving, and to see where we might show up that way and how we might be able to turn the tide. We're starting a series today on the 7 deadly sins. Now we know in Unity that sin is an archery term, and it simply means making a mistake, missing the mark in archery. So what we're talking about is transforming the 7, let's say, vices into virtues. And the first is greed, transforming greed into generosity. The others that we'll look at along the way that are part of the deadly sins are things like anger and lust and envy and gluttony and sloth and pride. So have you ever noticed that your greatest strength is also sometimes your greatest area of an improvement? That the two sort of parallel one another? That's really that line that we'll walk during this time, to be able to flip, like flipping a coin, from greed to generosity, and from each of these vices into the virtue that is the flip side of the coin of each of those. And so we'll find ways that we can call forth those areas of improvement that are also natural strengths for us and buoy those up. So most of us hoard a little bit in some way, or we cling to things, or we maybe get a little greedy around certain things. We probably know what our areas are. You know, toilet paper in a pandemic, for example. So certainly we've heard a lot of stories of that being stored up by people, and then some of those folks got so much of that they were trying to return it to the stores. And so where does that come from? You know, underpinning that is that idea that there's not enough, right? And that is the myth that sort of runs underneath greed, that more is better is one of those myths, and there's never enough, there's not enough, there's a lack of some kind. I know one of the areas for me is like papers and books that I tend to keep a lot of those things around. And an organizer once said, oh, that's attachment to the written word. And she said it so easily and effortlessly, and it just sort of, oh, yeah, that's what that's about. So now I know, okay, so that's the attachment that's there, and I can let that go. So sometimes it helps to just recognize what it is that we're sort of grasping at or holding, or what it is that we are valuing, so we can look at it and see, oh, it's okay, we can let that go. There's plenty more words in the universe, and they will continue to flow through, right? Just like everything else, as we let go, then we open up that law of circulation, and that's all part of generosity. And maybe it's food. I think for a lot of us, one of these areas is food. We have this survival instinct in us that says, I have to eat till I'm full. And that instinct, that way of being is really, it had a place at one time, but for most of us, that's not where we're living now. I realize for some of us it is, that hunger is a real issue. For many of us, it's not so much, that there is plenty and there is an ease of getting plenty. So that old wiring tends to make us buy way more food than we need, eat more food than we need, and waste far more food than we need. The FDA says that in America, we waste 30 to 40% of our food supply that just gets dumped. And so they have, actually there are several agencies that have banded together in 2019 and made a goal for 2030, that by 2030 that Americans' food waste will be cut in half. And so we can do our part in that area as we look at what drives that need to feel full, what drives that need to have more and have more than we need and more than we can use and end up wasting so much. So whatever it is that we tend to store up, whatever it is, that behavior that is a little greedy or clingy or hoarding, it's based on this there's not enough. And so once we recognize that false belief that is underneath that, we can begin to shift, we can begin to transform. Many of us have more than enough and we continue to store up. But Jesus says, consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have no storehouse or barn, yet God feeds them. So how can we move toward that feeling of being free as a bird and being as confident as a raven? When I see a raven, I think of a bird that really knows itself. There's a sense of confidence in that. And so that raven knows that it will always be taken care of, that there is always plenty. It lives in a basic idea of abundance. It lives in an idea that there is plenty, and perhaps even generosity. Probably depends on the raven. But knowing and trusting that all of our needs are met are a key part of how we can loosen the grip on those things that we are clinging or storing up, and let go and let God. Will always be taken care of. Do you know that the American population, the entire American population, could fit in the 2.3 billion square feet of storage units that we have? That everybody could be sheltered in the storage units that we have alone. That's pretty remarkable. Like food, we have plenty of stuff to feed the world, to supply the world. It's just a matter of distribution. Now, some of us are keepers, and I got to admit, I'm one of those. I know Brenly will attest to that. It's a good thing because we're a good balance for one another. But you know, I believe, in part, at least in my defense, I keep in part for a conscious reason, for a frugal reason. Because I think if I keep that temporarily and I have the space for that thing, that it won't end up in a landfill, and I won't buy something else to fill that need. And so that's part of my thinking. But it's important that we also continue to revisit ourselves, our thinking, and why we keep or why we store up. Because I really want to weed out the greed wherever it is and open up the channels for generosity. And I think you probably do too. So that's really what we're looking at in this experience today together. To look at what we're hanging on to and then asking ourselves, how does this serve? Or as Marie Kondo would say, does it spark joy? And then thinking about who could it serve and releasing it in gratitude. That's a really just a beautiful process that brings our spirituality into our physicality and allows us to open up those channels and to move toward generosity and away from greed. I recently heard a radio interview with a journalist who works in the garment industry. And he said that on average, Americans buy 85 garments a year. And then he was, juxtaposing that against the fast fashion industry and how often those items are made by typically young girls working in countries such as Bangladesh, maybe about 16 hours a day, for about half the living wage that they really need to live, just even to supply their basic needs. And they often work in unsafe conditions. And on top of it all, there is this dump of chemicals that goes on devastating our environment. So when we know all of that, suddenly that $10 shirt isn't such a great deal. It costs a lot more than that. And when we become aware of the cost of things, the bigger picture, the universal cost of things, then we can't really go back. I hate to break it to you if that's new news for you, because I know I have sort of put the brakes on learning about some of these things. But once we know, there's other ways, and there's another path that can serve everyone. So what is the source and the cost of what we buy? With a little effort, we can find out. We have a lot of power to make change through our purchasing power, through our conscious choices that we can make. And so when we do, we can ask ourselves questions like, what is essential? What is sufficient? And what is aligning with my values? And that can help guide the way to everything that we do, and certainly the ways that we shop. I mean, certainly we can purchase less, but we can also purchase in a more conscious way from those who are working to be sustainable. And there are plenty of companies that are doing that, a lot more than I even ever realized as I began to just do a very quick search. One of the companies that came up is thegoodtrade.com, where they list 36 different ethical clothing companies that you can buy from, and a bunch of beauty products and other things like that. And I'm proud to say that a lot of those actually are in California. So there's a lot that we can do about just shifting our behaviors, our actions, to move ourselves into that beautiful quality of spirit that is called generosity. So what is essential? I think it's the question of our times. It's a question of this time, this exact time in our planetary history, to keep in the forefront of our minds what is essential. Because as we keep in the forefront of our minds, the industries, the things in our world that are essential, the things in our lives that are essential for our own personal well-being, they all align. And then we can begin to really work in those areas to open things up for the kind of world, the kind of flow that we want to live in. So what is essential? Well, the obvious ones, right? Food and water and clothing and shelter. And there's also some human essentials, I think, that we all are aware of needing. Connection. We're social beings. And we sure could use some kindness. I think that I'm going to call that essential. Kindness. And so if we keep those things in the forefront of our minds, then we can flip this process, the idea of not only keeping them in the forefront of our minds, but also keeping the idea of sharing, that there's plenty for all, that we can flip this coin from greed to generosity. Brene Brown, the researcher, defines generosity in a way that really hits upon those last couple that I mentioned, things like connection and kindness. She says that generosity, or her definition of generosity, is the ability to extend the most generous interpretation of somebody's actions and words and their own intentions. So if we are able to extend the most generous interpretation of somebody's intentions, words, and actions, we are offering a kind of generosity. We are offering a kind of spaciousness. It's almost bordering on forgiveness. And so it's that kind of open-spaced way that we offer kindness to one another. So when we do make a mistake, it doesn't become this overblown deal. It's just something that we can course correct with ease. And if we've got somebody who's holding that kind of generous space for us, it's a lot easier for us to flow back in to alignment with Spirit in the way that I think we all are wired to be in truth. We can also, rely on the Spirit within us, because the divine in us knows what is essential. There is an innate understanding of what is essential. And so it is through that we can share freely, by knowing that. That's what Spirit does, right? Spirit just flows. It shares freely. It's a source that keeps on giving. And so when we tap that source within us, when we tap that ability to be generous, it just flows with a sense of ease. And then we realize, this is how I'm meant to be. This is how things click. This is how things work. And then that old way of being, just that clingy old way of being, that storing up, it doesn't have a purpose anymore. We realize then we've overcome those false myths, those false beliefs that there's not enough. There's plenty. It's just a matter of getting it out there and sharing it. Practicing generosity. So it's just a matter of clearing the old baggage, really, so that we can free the truth, that we can free the Spirit. I remember years ago I was in a prosperity workshop and I just had this big aha. It seems so simple sometimes when you talk about it in hindsight, but those unconscious beliefs can be really stubborn. And so what I recognized is that I had this idea that to be wealthy was equated somehow with greed. And so I was blocking my own prosperity because I had this idea, this unconscious belief. But as I recognized it and had this aha, and then went through this exercise of imagining myself really wealthy, what arose as I got out of my own way and was able to overcome a little bit of that unconscious belief once the light of day was hitting it, then what I felt when I was imagining and feeling myself as a very wealthy person was the quality of generosity arising. And so my affirmation then became, certainly my financial prosperity affirmation became, I am wealthy and generous. The two together, not separated. I'm wealthy and generous, because then there was a recognition that the more I have, the more opportunities I have to give in bigger ways. Proverbs puts the giving first. Proverbs says, give freely and become more wealthy. Be stingy and lose everything. So Lynn Twist is an author. I've referred to her before. She's the author of The Soul of Money. What I really like about her work is she talks about prosperity in terms of sufficiency and generosity, not just abundance for abundance sake, but what do you do with it? And this belief system that says there is enough, I am enough, and therefore I can give freely without fear. So she shares that she, in the beginnings of her transformation, I guess you could say, or awakening, she and her husband had a lot of money. And she said they lived this life of leisure and comfort, but it just began to feel a bit empty for her. She was longing for a sense of meaning and contribution. And so she began to look at ways that she could change her lifestyle and use her resources for good and genuine service and in generosity. And that led her to have a call from the Amazon. And in that call from the Amazon, something called the Pachamama Alliance was co-founded by Lynn and others. So I want to share this video from the Pachamama Alliance. We can take a moment to see a little bit about the origins and what it's about. Let's take a look.
These are the Achuar people, an ancient dream culture, still living in harmony with their ancestral land. Nearly 5 million acres of pristine tropical rainforest in Ecuador and Peru.
Our people lived here undisturbed for thousands of years. Then our elders and shaman began to receive visions from our ancestors, warning that a menace was coming toward our people. We soon saw that danger, the destruction brought by oil companies to our neighbors to the north. It is Achuar tradition that we do not run from danger, but go towards it. So we reached out to seek support from people in the outside world.
In 1995, a call issued forth from the heart of the natural world that was heard thousands of miles away by a small group of people in the modern world. That summer, in a remote village in the rainforest, these two worlds came together, and the Pachamama Alliance was born.
Although we were called by the elders and shamans of the Achuar, something deeper had called us there, and we realized it was the spirit of life itself, the spirit of Mother Earth, what the indigenous people call Pachamama.
The Achuar appreciated that the Pachamama Alliance was working shoulder to shoulder with them to protect their land and culture. But they knew that this work in the rainforest was not enough.
From the very beginning, we recognized that the real threats to our land came not from the oil companies, but from the outside world itself. It is the modern world's dream of always wanting more and more that is causing the destruction of the forests. So we told our partners that to protect our lands permanently, they would need to work in their part of the world as well, and change the dream that is threatening the rainforest and the future of all life.
And so the Pachamama Alliance boldly committed itself to a twofold mission: to preserve the land and culture of the Amazon rainforest and to change the dream of the modern world.
And that is the dream, to change the dream of the modern world. That's our work. And we do that by transforming our mentality and our approach, just by making a shift. Where there is greed, where there is this idea that more is better, this myth that more is better, and this exclusive idea on me and mine, we can shift instead to a mentality that underpins generosity, that says there's plenty, there's more than enough for everyone, and that we can share freely from that place. And you know, there's always that understanding that from the physical to the spiritual, that if we're believing that there's not enough, there's usually an underpinning that we're not enough. And so there is that innate sense of worthiness that comes with this work as well. So, by the way, the Pachamama Alliance was able, with the Achuar people, was able to secure for them and with them 1.8 million acres of the rainforest that they have full title to now. So we can rest easy that at least 1.8 million acres of the rainforest, the lungs of our planet, are being cared for by good stewards who have the greater good in mind for many, many generations to come, at least 7. So, you know, sometimes it takes the purity of a child to remind us of our generosity. There's a story in Soul Food by Jack Kornfield and Christina Feldman. It's set in Illinois. There's a young family, an 8-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son. And the girl contracts this rare blood disease. And they are looking for a donor, a blood donor that will match for her. And they're, you know, they got the all call out and nothing is coming in and she's getting weaker. And they realize that her 6-year-old little brother actually is a match. And so the mother and the minister and the doctor sit down with the 6-year-old boy and they ask him if he'd be willing to contribute his blood to save his sister's life. He says he has to think about it. And several days go by before he comes to his mother and says, I've made my decision. I will do this. And so this brave little boy and his sister go to the hospital with the doctor, and the doctor sets it up in a way that's really friendly for them and helpful for them to see what's happening. So they have their 2 cots together. And he takes a half a pint of blood from the boy, and he says now he wants him to see the effects, which are pretty immediate, of putting that blood into his sister. And so you could see the color starts to flush in her cheeks, and she starts to look a whole lot healthier just from that simple transfusion. Then the boy calls to the doctor, and he says, come here. And he wants to say this in secret, and so he whispers to the doctor, how long before I die? You see, in his literal mind, he thought that giving blood to his sister to save her life was giving his life. Now that is amazing generosity. It doesn't really get any bigger than that or any purer than that. And the truth is, that's how we're wired. That's how we come in, or that's how we've been created, to be that generous, to be that caring, to be that loving, because we are inseparable from the divine. We just have forgotten. The Wendigo has forgotten. The Wendigo has forgotten who they are. The Wendigo has forgotten the way of the divine. And it is truly our work to dream a new world, to dream a different dream for the modern world. One that is marked by this divine quality of generosity, and that erases and lets go and dissolves greed. So that dark side of humanity that is the Wendigo is brightened by the light that you bring when you shift yourself into generosity. And we can do that. We can remember who we are again by some simple acts that we've talked about today, by shifting the way that we think, by shifting the way that we shop, by shifting the way that we act. And to recognize that those simple acts, those $20 purchases, or the ways that we treat the people around us can shift everything on this planet. And so as we weed out the greed and we open up the space for generosity to come in, we do that by these actions. Staying present, too, to the opportunities that come right before us in any given moment to share our good, to be of generous service. And choosing over and over again long-term fulfillment for the good of all over short-term gratification for our own selfish and immediate needs. It makes a huge difference, every small act. So as we do these things, we become, as Gandhi once said, the change we wish to see in our world. And as we do these things, we can make conscious, and as we make conscious choices in particular, we can transform greed, that deadly sin of greed, into the living virtue of generosity. So let's know this together. Let's speak it together and affirm it in our hearts and move through the next week really steeped in this teaching of shifting this vice into a virtue. Together, I invite you to say this affirmation and maybe to work with this affirmation throughout the week in helping remind you. Let's say it together. Through my conscious choices, I transform greed into generosity. And so it is. Thank you for listening today.
Thank you, Kristen, for that message today.
We're having a little allergy issue here, so just so you know.
Yeah. Okay. So whether you have a joy or a concern on your heart today, our prayer chaplains are available to provide prayer support during our virtual patio conversation after the service. You may also contact them by phone and email. Please complete the connection card on the Watch Live page or click on Prayer Request at the bottom of the home page. Our prayer team will be praying with you throughout the week. Now, let's open our hearts to the practice of giving. Our spiritual home thrives with your continued generosity. So I invite you now to prepare your gifts as we align with the universal law of circulation. As we give, we shall receive. In truth, there is no lack or limitation. Abundance is our true nature. In addition to sending checks through regular mail or direct deposit through your bank, there are 2 ways to give online. You may click on the Donate button on the Watch Live page or download the Give app. Remember that Give is spelled G-Y-V-E. I invite you to repeat our prosperity affirmation with me together. Divine love, one with me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. I am joy-filled and grateful.
Let's ring out the bells of freedom. Our hearts beat the rhythm of joy. We'll see through this world of illusion. Our love is too strong to destroy. Let's take the ladder through the mirror and stand upon a different land where all the unanswered questions can be found in the palm of our hands. Let's ring out the bells of freedom. Our hearts beat the rhythm of joy. We'll see through this world of illusion. Our love is too strong to destroy. Since we belong to each other, we open up the sacred doors, and the rainbow never ends. We're all sailing on silver shores. We'll soar like the eagle, dance in the wind. We'll find our peace where truth
Bells of freedom. That was the perfect explanation for where we are with this quality of generosity. It also reminded me of a prophecy when they were singing about the eagle, that in South America they have a prophecy that a lot of the shamans, that when the eagle and the condor fly together, that we will be in this place of harmony. And so the eagle's way is the North American way, and the condor's way is the South American way. And that Pachamama alliance is a really wonderful way of bringing those together. So we are indeed working together as a whole, and that gives me, and I'm sure it does you, a lot of faith and hope that we are moving in the right direction. So knowing all that with our hearts full and lots of gratitude for all your gifts, let us bless our offering. We give thanks for the ever-increasing, constant flow of absolute good in our lives now. And so it is.
And let's bless our frontline workers. Frontline workers, we love you, we bless you, we appreciate you, and we behold the divine light within you.
And our children have some sweet memories for us today from the Valentine's bake sale. So let's go over and take a look.
One mind, one love, one coming together. One heart, one mind, one love coming together.
Well, let's bless those beautiful children and their teachers together. Children and teachers, we love you, we bless you, we appreciate you, and we behold the divine light within you. So it is. And now it's time for our prayer of protection, our traditional prayer to close our service just before our peace song. And so I invite you now, as we open up and hold once again, everybody, really, the entire world, all those who might be dealing with COVID or fears of COVID, which pretty much, I think, covers the spectrum. So let's hold everybody in prayer as we share this prayer of protection. The light of God surrounds us. I am light. The love of God enfolds us. I am love. The power of God protects us. I am power. The presence of God watches over us. I am presence. Wherever we are, God is. I am divine. Stick around to the end of our service so you can see some community member selfies. We always have some new ones each week. And if you want to contribute to these, please send your wavy, a 30-second silent waving video is fine, to office@unityofwalnutcreek.org, and you'll get to see yourself on TV next week. And so now we invite you to join us in our peace song. You are the light and the love and the peace on earth right now. So let your light shine.
Have fun and spread joy.
Have a great week, everyone.
Oh, good morning. Good morning. This is God. I will be handling all your problems today. Yes, I will not need your help in any way. I know it. So have a good day. Have a good day. Have a good day. Have a good day. Good afternoon. This is God. I will be handling all your problems today. Yes, I will not need your help in any way. No way. So have a good day. Have a good day. Have a good day. Have a good day. Good evening. This is God. I will be handling all your problems tonight. I will not need your help to make things all right. So have a good night. Have a good night. I hope you sleep tight and have a good night. Stephen! Be still and know that I am God. Once again, I will be handling all your problems today.